How's it going? Today, we're going to talk a little bit about MLA citation, documentation, and how to incorporate source material into your writing. Okay, we're not going to go too heavy today, just kind of easing our way in. So, I'm going to go ahead and kick up our presentations, and we'll get started today. All right, so let's get this going here. So again, MLA citation documentation, this is how we use a primary source to support our essays, to help kind of support our argument, okay? So learning outcomes for today, goals. You know you're gonna be successful if you understand what plagiarism is and how to avoid it. If you understand what page citations are, you better understand how to apply rules for citation, source integration, and an essay, and then how to create a works cited. So let's take a look here. Before we begin, I'd like you to go ahead and take about 5 minutes on a piece of scratch paper and respond to the following, or you can do it in a journal, notebook. But what does plagiarism mean? What do you think it means? And why or why not do you think it might be wrong? So go ahead, pause the video, and take a minute to jot down what you already know about this topic. Okay, we're back. So in this case, you think about plagiarism, it's taking somebody else's work, taking credit for their work and not giving them credit, right? If you think about how hard you've worked on certain assignments, and then if somebody else was able to copy that and get the same good grade that you did, you'd probably feel pretty frustrated about that, right? Or maybe at work, if you went ahead and did a lot of work to prepare a project or presentation for your supervisor, or maybe you were the one on shift where you did all the cleanup and close up, but somebody else got credit for it, that would be really frustrating. And so plagiarism is a very serious offense in academics, right? Whether, high school, college, and beyond, we need to make sure that if we use somebody else's work, and there are a lot of times where you have to, you need to make sure that you give them credit for it, okay? So let's move on. Within text, we not only give credit inside the body of our essay, we call that an in-text citation, but we also have that work cited. So we list all the different works that we might have referenced over the course of our paper. And it's really important that we do this in higher education especially, but even in high school, right? We want to show that we understood the reading assignments and that we're able to use that author's argument to support our own. The idea here is that you're a smart person, right? And we need to have proof, though. We need to have additional support to show that your ideas are good. So you find additional quotes that back up your argument, okay? And that's what we call synthesizing the ideas of multiple perspectives. Your perspective with author number one and author number two, and you bring it all together into one compelling logical argument, okay? Now, nuts and bolts, we talk about in-text citation. This is, again, where you make specific reference to the words that an author used, as well as the page number, okay? So if you look at the example here, I've made up a couple examples for us to look at. The boys were, quote, we start the quote because now I'm no longer using my words, I'm using my author's words. Terribly mischievous, end quote, said mother. So you can see here, this is the direct quote that I borrowed from our author. And then I don't put a period in yet. I make sure I have parentheses, the last name of the author, the page number that I pulled this quote from, close the parentheses, and then I put an end punctuation. This lets me know the idea is finished. For a lot of students, I tend to see, well, the sentence ends right here. Yes, that's true. End punctuation shows us when a sentence ends. But what's also really important is that end punctuation shows us when an idea ends. And Smith page 1 is attached to the idea of being terribly mischievous. Does that make sense? So make sure you have your quote and your page citation all within that one sentence, okay? Now, if I was to quote from Smith later in the paragraph, I don't need to include Smith's last name in the page citation. I just have to include the page number. You can see the example down below. All right. He said, and I quote, "I know they were bad, but boys will be boys," end quote, parenthetical citation on page 2, and then the end punctuation. Okay? Now, this is really important to look at, is that you don't want to just drop your quote into the middle of your paragraph. Okay? Think about it like this. If you go to a party, right, everyone kind of gets into a circle and they're all kind of chatting. It's really weird when somebody's on the outside of your circle listening in and then they start laughing like they're a part of your conversation. It's a weird moment, right? It's really awkward. Everybody notices that person off to the side laughing, but they weren't included in the discussion. It's weird, okay? The dropped quote's kind of like that. It just shows up in the middle of your paragraph and it's like, whoa, isn't somebody here to introduce you? And that's something you as a writer have to think about. You need a little bit of an introductory phrase to weave that quote into your argument, all right? Just like if we were at a party, and again, you have that circle of people, right? You don't want to say, "Oh, that's my friend Jeff. Jeff, come on over here." And then Jeff can come in and join the discussion and enjoy the jokes, right? So here you can see this sentence, "I think those boys should be sent to the country," end quote, Smith too. This doesn't work. That's a dropped quote. Nowhere in this sentence did I, the writer, include anything. I just copied down what Smith wrote. All right, that's a dropped quote. We want to make sure we do not have those in our writing. To do this better, I need an introductory phrase. So I wrote, "Abe said that he thought those boys should be sent to the country," Smith too. Here, "Abe said that he thought" is my introductory phrase. It's not earth-shattering. It could be as simple as, "He said those boys should be sent to the country," as long as I know who the he refers to. All right. So having that kind of phrase helps incorporate it and blend the quote into my writing in an organic, natural way. Okay. And you'll notice you make sure that you blend it in a way that's grammatically correct. It's smooth and it doesn't break up the flow. So that's in-text citation and source integration. All right. So what I'd like you to try out now, if you want, is to take one of your previously drafted essays and update your copy so it now uses direct references from a text and reflects those rules for in-text citation and source integration. Okay? Now, we're going to switch gears into a different presentation because we've talked about how to do it, but not every quote is created equal. Some quotes are going to be stronger and better than others. So let's go ahead and shift gears on this, and we're going to focus on selecting and integrating quotes, okay? So for each quote, you want to ask yourself, does this quotation say something in a way that's original and interesting, and it's the most powerful way to phrase this idea? That's the kind of thing you want to quote. You're going to notice, though, you don't pull the entire paragraph. You don't pull multiple sentences. When we quote, we're quoting selectively, just a part of a sentence, okay? So you pick the most powerful part of that idea that you're going to use. You also want to ask yourself, does this quote come from an expert, whose authority is really going to help support your argument, okay? Now, if you're just writing in a response to a text, then you're just quoting from that primary source, right? But as you kind of move forward in your academic studies, you're going to be quoting from lots of different texts, both primary texts and secondary texts, okay? So you want to make sure that it's going to actually help support your argument. The last thing you want to consider is, does the quote feature an idea that you're going to want to argue for or against? Does it help you, or are you kind of pushing back against it, okay? Because sometimes you may be asked in a paper to either defend or refute, that is to argue against, all right, a particular statement or a particular article that you've read, okay? Either way, you're going to need to select elements from that article that you either agree with or you disagree with. So how do you do this? Let's look at some examples, okay? So if I'm writing a paper and my thesis is that Dr. Helvey needs to be fired, which makes for a rough day for me, let's take a look and see if there's some quotes that are going to be useful to supporting that argument. So the first quote is, only 40% of students reported that they liked Dr. Helvey's class, from John Doe. Do you think that's going to be helpful or not? Yeah, that's going to be helpful, because if only 40% like my class, that means 60% don't like my class. That's not helping me stick around. Our third quote, 100% of all Dr. Helvey students who pass end up passing all future college courses and become millionaires. Does this quote help the case that I need to be fired, or do you think that it hurts the argument that I should be fired? Right. This is not helping you. If everyone who passes my class ends up passing all their future courses and becomes millionaires, I would have millions of people wanting to come take classes with me. So that's not going to help you any. Let's look at that third quote. College administration reported that Dr. Helvey was often found sleeping during committee meetings. Do you think that's going to help or hurt your argument that I need to be fired? Right. If I'm falling asleep in meetings, that means I'm not doing my job. It's probably another piece of evidence to help. So you can kind of see, you need to think carefully about the kind of quotes you're picking and whether they're going to support your argument, whether they're going to hurt your argument, or whether they're just kind of filler and they're not really doing anything for your argument. You only want the ones that are the quotes that are going to support the argument. So what I want you to look at here is, this is a quote generating worksheet. It's a really interesting strategy to help you as you're going through your different reading assignments and trying to find some good, useful quotes and then what to do with them, right? And if you go through this process, it's going to help you write your paper before you actually even start it, okay? And even if you're not writing a paper, it's going to be really useful for going into your different classes and being able to provide some text-based answers when your professors are asking you questions, right? So you'll see here, the first part is the author and the page. So I select the author for, full name, and the page number where I found that. Okay, so here is page 14, and there's the direct quote that we looked at before. Here's why I think it's, and I say what it means. Okay, talk about how the fact it's a large number of students liked the class, but the majority did not. And then I explain how it relates back to my thesis. So what happens when it comes time for me to write my paper, I have all of this information explained out. I can even copy and paste each one of these pieces, all right, into my paper to help provide those well-developed and well-explained details. So now it's your turn. What I'd like you to do is to find a reading assignment over the course of the semester and see if you can find 3 quotes that you're going to use in one of your essays. Remember, as you use the quote generating worksheet, you want to write your thesis down at the very top. It's super important that you do this because that's going to help you stay focused, right? You're not going to wander off onto the wrong topic. You'll think about your thesis and then what pieces of evidence from the text will help you make that thesis seem more valid, okay? So take some time, fill that out, and see how it goes, and then come back here. All right, you should be back, and we're going to get started again. Now, we got to talk a little bit about integrating the quote into the text. We touched upon this before, but I want to go over it one more time. And that's important because a lot of times I see students dropping quotes into their assignments, or if they forget to use quotes, then they're plagiarizing. And that's a serious academic offense, which I know I mentioned before, okay? So again, I want you to look at these rules and, open with that introductory phrase, all right? Quotation marks are signaling that an outside source is getting used. So you start with a quote, and as you write down the author's words, once you get to the end of that point, you end with a quote, okay? Then you finish with your page citation and the punctuation mark. And you can see the example down below. I've got it all color-coded here. So in red, it's the introductory phrase. Dr. Helvey's work outside of class was poor as, and then I use quotation marks, and then the quoted material. College administration reported that Dr. Helvey was often found sleeping during committee meetings. I use the end quote, parentheses, Smith, 5, parentheses, and then my end punctuation, okay? And that's how you blend an outside source into your writing. Now, let's go back to the previous presentation because I want to go ahead and briefly look at what's called the works cited. We've talked a little bit about that, citing inside your paper. Now, at the very end, you have what's called the works cited, and this is where you list all of the different sources that you've been quoting in your paper. Now, if you're only responding to a particular essay that you've read, your works cited is only going to have one essay or one article or one book attached to it, which makes it really easy, okay? So we're going to take a look at an example, and I want you to see what it looks like. Then I'm going to show you a really easy way to work around it, okay? So this is what a finished works cited looks like. All right, you're going to notice no bold-faced or anything crazy like that. The text for the title looks exactly the same. And this is always the last page, and it stands by itself. So it shouldn't be like in the middle of your last page or anything like that. It is the last page, okay? For a book, you have the last name, first name, period. You have the title of the book in italics, period. City that the book was published in, colon, publisher, comma, date it was published, and then whether you got it in print or digital, okay? And then this is simply how you cite an article out of a text as well. Now, the formatting looks funky, and it's a pain to get if you're not used to doing it. But these are all the different marks that go into it. It's really difficult. My recommendation, there are websites like EasyBib, or you can go to Citation Machine, all kinds of different websites that'll do this for you, okay? So you know what's coming next. It's time to practice. What I want you to do is to create a works cited, but don't worry about these different entries if you don't want to. That's fine. What I'd like you to do is to create a works cited for the essay that you just worked on, the one that you were finding quotes for. I would like you to make a works cited and put that at the end of one of your essays. That way, you'll know that you're able to do it well. And again, these websites are great because you can make the page and just download it direct, okay? I hope that helps. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me or reach out to your professors.